Welcome to the 43rd episode of Tokenizing Everything, our weekly interview series with thought leaders in the blockchain industry. Today's guest is Jan Oliver Sell, Head of Operations at Coinbase Germany. Before we begin, I have to mention that all opinions are solely personal and do not reflect the opinion of Amazing Blocks, Coinbase, or any other involved parties. So it's a pleasure to have you here today, Jan. How are you?
I'm good, Nicolas. Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great and exciting times in the crypto space to be in, and also a lot of exciting news coming from Coinbase Germany. So at the beginning already, props to you. You're doing a great job there. But before we really dive into this, let's maybe start a bit with the personal background from you and why you chose the crypto / blockchain industry as your kind of destination.
Sure. In terms of background, I guess I spent a long time in traditional finance. So I spent a long time in London working on sort of traditional banking and then hedge funds, private equity, that kind of thing, structuring funds, but also setting up operations teams for various fund managers. And in a lot of that time that I was there, there wasn't really a lot of movement around, the settlement cycles and things like that. A lot of that, just didn't change, didn't progress, and there wasn't a lot of innovation, I guess, right, around that stuff. And sort of 2016, 2017, a friend of mine who was starting to build like social impact bonds on Ethereum. It's quite far ahead of his time. I think it's probably still quite far ahead of the time, to be honest. But the more he was kind of telling me about this project that he's working on, the more we sort of delved into Ethereum and sort of blockchain concepts. And the more I understood it, the more I realized the potential to really change the existing financial paradigm, right, and the existing financial system. And the more I kind of thought, I really want to be part of this ecosystem that's developing and that's building, a whole new future and a whole new way to do finance. And then, eventually kind of realize that it's not only finance, but basically everything, right? So I'm really, really excited to be part of the whole blockchain crypto ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's most likely the best decision, right, one could make at such a time that early in the finance space. So yeah, I mean, for me was the same in that sense. Also, kind of at first in the traditional space, and then diving into the crypto space, and it's just so much more dynamic. I even see it when I compare kind of the security token space, which obviously Amazing Blocks is a bit involved in as well, with the crypto space in general. You still see there also the differences, right? So yeah, it's definitely a good decision to make. When looking at your bio, one really sees that you're very much focused also on the operations, right? You also mentioned it quickly in your intro. Is there something specific about operations that you like, or how did you really become, let's say, interested in this field within an enterprise?
It's an interesting question. I guess I don't know. I think you kind of default into the role or the area that suits you best, and I think it's something that I do and have done relatively well. I like to think, at least, of basically, the being kind of the, I guess if I think of it as like, the operations is kind of the cog in the middle of a number of, different functions. And there's this cog in the middle that keeps the whole machine turning. And I find that, an interesting place to be, because it kind of, connects you with all different elements of the business, but also make sure that the business, as a whole, keeps running in the background. So I guess it's kind of a natural fit for more of a jack of all trades kind of person, like I found myself to be. So
yeah, it's definitely never boring, right? When working in operations, it's always something to do. And I really see also in my network that there's actually a couple of founders at companies and projects that would rather be like something like a COO than a CEO, actually, because it's just a bit more fun, right? And you can be a bit closer to the developers and all of that. So I actually saw it a couple of times now, and so therefore it's definitely quite interesting and definitely a very disruptive and innovative journey to take. So in regards to generally asset management that you've been involved in since a very long time, in that sense, apart from crypto and blockchain, do you also envision other technologies such as AI and IoT or which influence do you envision for these technologies to have actually on asset management apart from crypto? Obviously, it's always kind of involved with crypto, if we as I do believe in the token economy, right? But still, what from your perspective will also be other core pillars of innovation in the future?
I mean, I think it all kind of comes together, right? Look at the automated market makers that are being built. They're essentially, I guess, a form of AI, right? But being built on blockchains, and so you kind of take that development further. I think as I said, I think it just that you have all these different pieces come together, right, to create the new financial future. I think it's really interesting the way that all these different elements interlock, right? And you have AI projects that are blockchain based. A lot of the IoT stuff obviously ends up being blockchain based as well. So I think that at the end of the day, the exciting thing about the blockchain, especially for me with my more operations hat on, is that it's kind of like an infrastructure layer, right, on top of which this whole new system can be built. It basically enables the system to be built at all, right? So it's super exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you mentioned it correctly, right? Everything comes together through, crypto and tokenization of these respective assets in that sense, right? So there's definitely a lot of interesting trends coming up in the future, especially I think, in my opinion, also when you look at the big data industry, right? There's projects, coping with, democratizing access to data and enhancing data provenance. So there's definitely a lot of interesting, let's say, innovations coming in the future. But now let's take a deeper dive into Coinbase, right? Because obviously that's where you're doing a great job at currently. And potentially let's start a bit with the recent months. Maybe you want to share a bit to our listeners, what have been kind of the core achievements along this path for Coinbase, with a special focus on Germany, obviously, and then we can kind of dive deeper into the other topics around this amazing enterprise.
Sure, thanks. It's been a very exciting, I guess, journey for me even, and being Coinbase since the beginning of November last year. Sort of joined the German team as kind of the second person on the German team to help build the German license application at the time, but looking to build the German business under the BaFin license. It's quite a lot of work by a lot of people to put the application together and work with BaFin and work with the Bundesbank to get the license through. So obviously we were very excited to get the license when we did, and to be the first ones to get the license. And now now that we have the license, and now that we have a German entity, to be able to work directly with German users and build product and so on for Germany and for German users, under the auspices of the BaFin license, right? Going back to kind of the sort of core model, if you like, or Coinbase, of basically secure and simple access for everyone. Having the license gives us the possibility to really bring that to Germany in an active way, right? Before we had the license, we weren't able to sort of actively market to German users. It was difficult to really tweak the services for German users, and so now that we have the license, it's exciting because we're able to really approach the market as we'd like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just from my also experience within the space, it was really like a wow moment in that sense within the German blockchain community, right? Everyone was like, wow, Coinbase got the license, and it really made the waves in that sense. So definitely a big achievement, right? And definitely not easy to achieve in a country like Germany. I mean, I know this also from a couple of projects, right? So therefore, definitely a good step into the right direction of staying compliant. And generally, I mean, when I look at the entire Coinbase path and also kind of the feedback within the crypto industry, something that is always mentioned is that Coinbase is a perfect gateway to this space, right? I think if you look at crypto products, NFTs are kind of a good gateway, right? But if you look at kind of service providers, Coinbase would be a very intuitive gateway, which is really the key, right? Making crypto intuitive for people. Would you say that this is really what differentiates Coinbase from other crypto exchanges, or are there other points that you would also single out on that respect?
Exactly. I mean, that's the main the main thing. I think security and ease of use, right? We want to give people easy and secure access to crypto, and I guess the thinking behind that is also just to help to grow the ecosystem by bringing people in a way that's that's easy and secure, and doesn't sort of scare users off by being too complicated into what is quite a complicated asset class, right? At this point still. And I think we're only going to really help to build out the ecosystem by bringing more people in, and getting more people interested in the space, and in the, all the different exciting projects that are going on, right? So
yeah, definitely. I mean, being that bridge for the newbies, so to say, especially in this space, is really crucial to foster and accelerate mainstream adoption, right? So therefore, it's definitely a good step. And also, when already speaking about crypto exchanges in general, when looking at your bio, I mean, that's a question I also had to ask in that sense. I think it definitely is something that my listeners are interested in, is kind of, you also worked at Binance before, and obviously Binance is another major player within the centralized exchange ecosystem and generally the crypto space. So if you compare these two, I mean, you don't have to, obviously, are there certain points that you would say, okay, that's how they're differently structured, or what is your feedback on that regard?
Sure. Yeah, they're quite, they're two very different companies, right? Binance has a lot of great people, and you can't deny that the innovation and the product that they're creating. But I think from my perspective, coming back to the idea of growing the ecosystem and really trying to bring more people to crypto, I think given the fact that we now have a set of regulations, not only in Germany but also globally, I think the time's come to follow the rules and to work with the regulators to try to offer users kind of a regulated and a safe and trustable product, right? And safe and trustable access. And I think that's where I see a big differentiator in terms of the way Coinbase's approach is, and has been, to work with the regulators and to get to get the license like we have done in Germany, right? Which is quite different from the approach that at least I experienced in my time at Binance. I guess now if you look at some kind of the headlines, you see that they're talking a bit more compliance, but I think, like I said, I think it's for me, I think that Coinbase is going about this the right way, right? We're trying to build this in a way that that the regulators are happy with as well, but then that also means we're a safer way for users to access it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, thanks for the insightful and transparent answer. I think you did a good job, right, at answering this very, very difficult question, right? But looking at let's say more easy, so to say, questions to answer, you also recently announced a collaboration with Solas Bank, right? So this is obviously a major step also further in regards to staying compliant. Yeah. What are your hopes here for this collaboration? And also, do you have further plans of similar collaborations within the either German or general crypto space?
Yeah, Solas, they have a great onboarding product, KYC product, especially in Germany, where the KYC process can be a little bit different from that in other jurisdictions. And hopefully, we can help to bring kind of an easier KYC to people. Through the Solas collaboration, and Solas have a number of other interesting products they do, with the back office banking stuff that they do. And so we're in talks with them like plenty of other partners in terms of building out our own product portfolio. There's things that they do that are interesting there, and and other partners. I can't really obviously sort of specify anything at the moment. But there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in this space, right? So
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a lot of great projects and startups out there, and also like bigger players, right, that are entering this space. So it's really becoming a diverse and holistic ecosystem. Looking at the crypto space, much different than from like, let's say 5, 6, 7 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So at this stage, I would like to pose this week's Being Crypto special question, right? A question from the Being Crypto community for today. And, they basically asked what role will data play in the future in regards to, tokenized data that potentially could also be something for Coinbase, or do you believe that this may be a bit too exotic in that sense? What is your take on this?
Well, in terms of the data question, I think, there's no question the data, in a sense, will become the new currency, right? If not already, and I think it's, one of the really interesting things, again, about using the blockchain as a kind of infrastructure layer for tokenizing this kind of thing is, essentially what you can move towards is a kind of tokenization of the data in a way that allows like self-sovereign identity and, and all those other use cases where you allow the individual to control their own data and to monetize their own data potentially, right? That's all, really, really interesting stuff. On the other hand, you've also have, I guess, like decentralized oracles, and the whole oracle process and data access for smart contracts. There's a lot of different, angles around data, right? That are all quite interesting. In terms of whether or not Coinbase would list a data token, we look at all kinds of tokens, all kinds of digital assets, and we're really sort of trying to accelerate our asset listing program, but within the confines of our due diligence process, right? I think it's very important to us that we do our due diligence on the tokens we list, but we're obviously looking at all kinds of interesting tokens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I also hear from within the industry that there's actually some data-backed stable coins and things like that out there that are
that's
in
interesting.
the works, right? So yeah, because I think generally if you look at data, right, it's most likely a bit more stable, right, than crypto assets. So therefore, it could definitely be interesting and like a potentially more innovative approach. And it's just saying like a stable coin pegged to the dollar or something. So I definitely believe that. As you mentioned, right, data is a very auspicious tokenization use case. Diving a bit deeper now into the just general, token economy, what would you, let's say, define as your favorite tokenization use case?
Well, I think at the moment, NFTs and kind of play to earn, right? I think that's really a really interesting development and direction of travel. I don't know, would you consider NFTs to be a tokenization? I think they are in a way, right? Yeah. So, and I'm really interested in the in the play to earn things like like Axie Infinity and that kind of stuff, where basically you're essentially tokenizing something that's valuable to someone, right? Like their time playing, right? That's essentially what you're tokenizing, and you're giving it a value, which is really quite innovative. I mean, it's, you have a BAT token as well, which hasn't worked out quite as well as the as Axie, but the point is, in longer term, what you're doing is finding ways to tokenize things that are valuable to people, right? And I think that's longer term where the whole token economy could get super interesting, because you could potentially even start to change the economics, right? Because move away from a kind of work-based valuation of someone to you can use tokenize your time, tokenize your art, tokenize things that are interesting to you, and earn a living that way. Could be a whole different economic paradigm, right, at some point. But it's all built on this system that we're talking about the whole time, right? This kind of blockchain infrastructure layer, which is what makes it such an exciting and interesting place to be involved with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you definitely hit the right spot there in regards to the future of work, right? I also personally believe that when looking at it, it's going to be something where it's not necessarily a money for time-based model solely, right? There's going to be a lot of different factors that will come into play in a much more, let's say, decentralized approach to this. So definitely interesting. And with the tokenization of everything in that sense, right? Any type of value that are within your scope, right, can be tokenized. And I definitely also think that here IP will really become more accessible and feasible for people, and therefore going back also to NFTs, right, as with the perpetual royalty models, the respective let's say tokenization of that IP is definitely also something that where the NFTs, as you mentioned, right, could play a huge role, but not speaking to little off GameFi, which is also right, as you mentioned correctly, a perfect trend. And just from my experience also, I believe that GameFi or MetaFi, as something people call it, the convergence of DeFi, right, and the metaverse is in the future something that is also much easier to integrate into the DeFi ecosystem and everything like that, because it does not revolve around all too much of the respective regulation. But speaking about disruptive models of organization and all of this, another core aspect in that sense is the, let's say, evolution and the process of the emergence of DAOs, right? Decentralized autonomous organizations.
Yep.
You know them from the DAO hack back in 2016, but I mean, generally DAOs have always been around, and people even argue that Bitcoin network or the Ethereum blockchain are, you know, to a certain degree a form of a DAO. Do you believe that eventually most companies will transform into DAOs, as for instance, Shapeshift has done it recently?
I guess if you kind of go back a few steps, I think that, you know, one of the interesting things about the space is that the blockchain allows the opportunity to explore and experiment with governance models, right? That's one of the core functions and many projects in the space, right? But what it means basically is that we have the opportunity to explore governance models on a scale and at a velocity that we've never had before, I think, in sort of human history, right? And what I mean, and you know, where it ends up, I think, is that you end up with things like DAOs being created, and then governance structures within the DAOs coming to a place, growing to a maturity pretty quickly where they can function. You know, you had the DAO hack, sure, but I think the more, you know, as they develop, I think they've become more and more stable and interesting forms of organization. Then, you know, you could sort of dream the dream even further and say potentially, you know, DAOs could become a new way of social organization, right? Like potentially, you may end up in a place where you don't have countries anymore, but you have a number of decentralized just social structures, right? Probably in a little bit more than 10 years, but but I think basically the building blocks for new social models there, right? And it's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's an interesting point in regards to governments, right? Like I also think that with the kind of adoption of the metaverse, there's people like Outlier Ventures CEO Jamie Burke even arguing that governments, and to a certain degree, will subordinate to the metaverse in that sense, right? And to these centralized communities. But obviously, yeah, let's see how this plays out. But it's definitely like an interesting approach, which to a certain extent is definitely possible, I believe. But yeah, obviously there will be a lot of let's say obstacles to surmount when it comes to the regulation here on that respect. But speaking of also kind of this, let's say two sides, right? On the one hand, the regulated approach, on the other hand, the unregulated approach. Another kind of combination would be decentralized exchanges, centralized exchanges, as well as financial institutions. Where do you see these kind of three pillars, or how do you see them kind of working together in the future, and how do, like, let's say, where would you see the exchange industry in the next couple of years from now on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the space is huge, right? And it's growing at an incredible pace. So I think there's space for everyone at the moment, right? I think between the centralized exchanges and the DEXs. I think it also depends on who you're talking about as users, right? I think that the centralized exchanges provide on ramps for a certain type of user, whereas the DEXs tend to be a little bit more complicated to operate. You're talking about probably more advanced users, or you may even see a progression of users through initially dabbling in the centralized exchanges, and then being interested in more esoteric tokens that they can only find in 1inch or whatever. Then moving on to that. And so I kind of feel like everyone has their part to play in the ecosystem, right, at the moment. And in terms of direction of travel, it's an interesting one, because on the one hand, given the current regulatory models, obviously the centralized exchanges have an advantage longer term, because it's something that the regulators are beginning to understand, and also can regulate. Whereas obviously the decentralized model is a lot harder for the regulators to get a grip on. Just in a sense, the regulators still tend to operate on a national level, whereas the whole this whole blockchain industry operates kind of internationally by default, right? Which I think is one of the things that again makes it so exciting and makes it so dynamic, right? You've got basically the best people in the world working on this stuff all around the world together all the time, right? Which is, I think, again, it's kind of a new place for us as a global society, right? Where you have people from all around the world working together on something in a decentralized fashion, but but creating new, very interesting new spaces and new structures, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, here and there, one even argues, right, that even some, at least decentralized exchanges are not as decentralized as they kind of, aim to be. I mean, sure, like from the back end, I think it's more or less always decentralized, but the front end especially, right? I mean, you just have to look at Uniswap and their troubles, so to say, the SEC, where it's like, okay, how can a decentralized exchange, let's say, delist certain tokens, at least from the front end? So therefore, I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting how this plays out. But I also believe, right, like as you mentioned, that there will be kind of a complementary approach to the future going forward. But speaking about, just quickly the SEC, another, question I may have to ask, what are your thoughts on the current or ongoing discussions in regards to the Coinbase treatment of the SECs, which were also kind of this, let's say, comparison between the decentralized exchange space where stuff can happen and centralized space, so to say, where it's then again suddenly forbidden is coming to play, in that sense. What are your thoughts on this current situation, and potentially also from within Coinbase, how is the situation on that regard?
Well, I mean, I guess to some extent we're limited in terms of what we can say, because it's it's an ongoing process and situation. But broadly, there's definitely a pressing need for regulation and regulatory clarity in the space, right? We need the regulators to understand the space and to be clear about how they're going to regulate the crypto economy, right? And that goes for for all the aspects of it. And the SEC, in the US, has a vital role to play in that, the same way Bundesbank and BaFin have a vital role to play in that here in Germany at the moment, and probably as we get to MiCA in the future as well, right? And so, I mean, we've been engaging with the SEC the same way we've been engaging with BaFin and Bundesbank. On the one hand, trying to do what we can to educate, and to kind of help the regulators understand the space and the models that we're building. And in terms of the SEC in particular, we have a public policy team now that engages with legislators, aiming to further the mission of the company, and to build out maybe complementary regulatory proposals, or otherwise help work with the regulator, right, to like I said, to sort of regulate the space with a bit more clarity. And because I think broadly, broadly it's what we need to also to bring in institutions, right? And that was one of the sort of interesting aspects of getting the license here in Germany, is that the fact that it's licensed now here in Germany means that a lot more institutions can come and play, if you like, right? Can start to get involved, and so this kind of regulatory clarity is crucial, right? And it helps the space mature, and it helps to bring in bring in more money and help to take things forward, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Jenny, I think, right, I heard from a lot of sources also in regards to institutions or bigger players that, let's say, the safest place to do like an OTC trade is typically, right, Coinbase Pro, and therefore I think in that regard it's definitely a good address anyway, right? And with the regulation on top, it's just like kind of opening the last steps, or like in regards to kind of adopting it within the institutional space. And I mean, in regards to working with regulators, right, clarity is the key, as you mentioned, right? And I think on that regard, yeah, I mean, just from my kind of assessment of situation, Coinbase is doing a lot, right, in regards to compliance. So it's definitely a difficult situation, but I'm sure that things will be worked out. And therefore, coming to the, let's say, final question of the day, a very easy one, right? Where do you see blockchain and tokenization in 10 years from now?
Yeah, I know it's a question you like to ask. I think it's an interesting one, because I think 10 years is maybe too long a time horizon, right, for for us to be able to predict. Because even 2 years ago, DeFi was hardly a term anyone had heard of, right? And it's and look at the total value locked now, right? It's crazy the speed with which this space is developing. Or NFTs, right? Even a year ago, NFTs were on not really on anyone's radar in the way that they are now, right? Who would have thought that someone would buy a JPEG for $70 million, right? A year ago. So 10 years from now, who knows, right? There's so many interesting things happening, and I would say we're basically at like version 0.3 at the moment of this kind of new financial and otherwise future that we're working on building. So are we going to reach version 1 in 10 years? I think probably before then, right? And what is that? What that version 1.0 is, I don't know. Right? There'll be version 1.0 of the finance 2.0, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's definitely an interesting answer. Thanks so much, Jan. It's been really a pleasure speaking with you, and a lot of very interesting topics that we touched on. And therefore, yeah, I mean, I wish you guys all the best of luck at Coinbase, and hope to follow your path, and yeah, see you soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, Nicolas. You too. Yeah. Have a good day. Take care. Bye.
You too. And to our listeners, as always, if you have any questions in regards to, blockchain related topics, crypto, tokenization, feel free to always reach out to myself. And yeah, see you guys in the next show. Thank you.